Hi, Victoria. This is Victoria Veldhoen. I lost my confidence there. I feel like I nailed it right before, and now I lost my confidence. Victoria Veldhoen.
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
And people in my own family sometimes pronounce it differently. So that sounds great. Victoria Veldhoen. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you, Victoria, for coming. Welcome to the Creator Jump Off podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. So I'm going to give your bio, and then I'm going to ask you 9 million questions.
Perfect.
So Victoria is a memoir and book ghostwriter, and she helps people who are changing the world for the better to tell their story in a kick-ass book. I really love this. And I was taking a look at your website before the interview, and I really love what you said about, like, at a wedding, you will forego the dance floor and go and, like, pick someone, pick a grandpa's brain or whatnot and listen to stories from them, which I really love. And so, yeah, just looking at your website, your enthusiasm and your excitement for what you do really shines through. So I'm really excited to get to know you and hear, all about your journey and where you're at today. So yay. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And it's nice to hear kind words about my website too, because people usually don't even read it. So that's amazing.
I know. I understand. It's rare that people actually read on the internet.
Yes.
But I appreciated what you wrote. So it seems like you have had a lifelong, passion for stories and whatnot. Do you want to tell me, when you were a kid, was there something, was there an impetus, or just it was innate in you, as a kid, you were really interested in stories or storytelling?
Yeah, that's an interesting question that I haven't been asked before. I always loved to tell stories. I always loved to listen to stories, as I think most kids do. I still remember when I was, I think, 7 or 8, and our assignment in class was to write a story, and I wrote 20 pages, but I didn't finish it. It was I don't know, the first quarter of a story, and they gave me full marks, and I was actually upset because I was like, this isn't a full story. You can't give me marks for something that's not complete. But I guess, I've always loved writing and telling stories. So it's kind of been a part of me forever, even when I was doing science for my career.
There's so many different ways that I want to go with this, but tell me, what was, when you were a kid, do you remember the first story that you wrote?
Oh, the first story. I don't, the story I was just referencing was about, I think, a dragon that couldn't find clothes that fit him or something. So he had to burn a whole bunch of towns. The problem was never solved. So there's no tidy resolution for that one. I think that's the first one I remember. Maybe not the first one I wrote, but the first one I remember. So
I love that. I feel like that when I can't find clothes that fit, I want to burn down towns. Shopping is really frustrating. I relate a lot.
Me too. I don't know why. As a kid, I would not have related, but as an adult, it's annoying.
Yes. So talk to me about you had a career in science, and then did you make a pivot into writing? Yeah,
that's correct. So I actually, in university back in the day, I majored in biochemistry and molecular biology. So I was for the bulk of my 12-year career in science, I was in kind of one lab, basically looking at the blood and urine of babies, checking for markers of diseases. So that's what I did for 12 years. And then, I had a pivot to ghostwriting, which is more recent, and have really enjoyed that. But like I said, I've always been a writer. I do have a master's of fine arts and creative nonfiction as well. So it wasn't totally left field, but I have definitely changed what I'm doing on an everyday basis. So, yeah.
So talk to me more about what made you pivot? Was it something about your career in science that was unfulfilling? Why did you pivot away from that?
Yeah. So, there are a few reasons. I had definitely hit a level of stagnation that I wasn't happy with. And I also had become a parent. I gave birth to my daughter in 2020, so pandemic baby. And as many parents will tell you, and what I felt myself is life-changing, and I felt like I needed to be happy with my life. Set a good example for her, because of course I don't want her to be unhappy. I want her to do whatever she wants to do. So that was kind of the inspiration to leave the career I'd had for so long, which is very scary for anyone that's done it. It's even when you know it's the right choice, it's a terrifying thing to do. And then, I leapt headfirst into ghostwriting and memoir writing. And I figured if I wasn't any good at it, that I would just get a different job later. I mean, you only live once. You might as well take risks, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's like my whole thing is like, life is too short to like be really miserable at doing work, right? Like the majority of our lives, we are working, right? Mm-hmm. So, I definitely can relate to like, in my past life, I was a graphic designer and a brand designer, and I really loved it. And I always will. But yeah, I kind of hit a point where I was just had a lot of burnout, and just giving all of my time and energy really to like help other people like build their dreams and goals, which is cool. Love it, but I was tabling all the things that I was really excited about and that I really wanted to do. I wasn't building my own dream. And so I definitely can relate. And now it's like the best of both worlds. Like I still help people create their dreams, which is my dream.
Yeah, I was going to say, now you're doing both because you help others as your business. So
yes, exactly. So it's a win-win now. So I love that, like, kind of like, well, let's let it rip, right? Like, I'm unhappy in this career, and was ghostwriting and creative writing, like, was that always kind of in the background of your head of like, oh, I wish I was doing this? Or was it really kind of more in the moment of 2020 and having your daughter and stuff and being like, okay, what am I going to do now?
I've always been writing, some years less than others. Even as a scientist, I would sometimes copyright blog posts or web articles for people, or like write my own stories. And then the MFA that I did, I wrote basically a book-length memoir. So I'd always been doing it. I never thought I could make money. Like I didn't consciously say that, but I think subconsciously I didn't think I could make money off it, so I didn't try. And then I think just becoming a parent coupled with the pandemic and probably things I've been feeling in my career for a while just was the perfect storm, I guess, for starting my own business. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I'm sure it's never like a kind of black and white. Like one day you woke up and you're like, I'm going to be a ghostwriter now. I'm sure it's like it's a process.
I mean, I guess I would say, because the way it first started, which the work I do, the first iteration of my business was solely writing books for grandparents. So like you saw on my website with talking to the grandfather instead of dancing. And that was also inspired by, because of course, having my daughter, and I'd lost my mother many years ago. So I couldn't ask her questions about, all the things I had questions about, some silly, some more profound. So then I thought I could help people with the elderly relatives they had left, ask them questions. And then, that expanded to some other ghostwriting as well. But there's always lots of inspirations once I start digging deep enough.
Yeah. So is that your focus, like of your business now, is like working with people and like their senior relatives and like getting stories from them?
I have two focuses, which I know whenever I'm reading about, entrepreneurship, they're like, pick one niche, which I haven't really done. I've kind of picked two niches. But it's working so far. So the one niche is the one I mentioned, talking to grandparents, and about half my clients are from that world. I'm preserving their legacy for their family, even great grandchildren, and that's really fun. And then the other half is I'm helping usually women entrepreneurs with their own book for their business, and it's usually still like there's a memoir component to it because their personal stories, they're important to their brand, generally speaking. So
nice. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, we are in the same entrepreneur group, which is really excellent. And I think it is possible. I mean, I understand that philosophy of like focus on one thing at a time, but I don't know. I think what's great about like your business is like, it's, even though you're doing two different things, it's still very niche and very specific, which I think is it's super important. And people, it's very clear, like from your website and stuff, and that like, this is what you do, right? You're not like a ghostwriter for anything and everything. Like these are the focuses that you have.
That's true. I mean, the niche is still memoirs and book length memoirs. That's true. The audiences are just a little bit different depending on who I'm talking to. Yeah,
sure. So in 2020, you decide, okay, I want to have a go at doing writing and ghostwriting. So how did that begin and how did you get your first client?
My first clients were just people that I knew already. So I just started talking to people. Like it was there was no specific plan that you can follow. It was just like, hey, I'm doing this now. I emailed a few people. And then my price, of course, was like being paid pennies. So people responded and they were friends or a friend of a friend for my first few clients. And that was perfect because it gave me validation that someone would pay me, even if it was just a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah. And so what, like, were you helping them with like family stories, like speaking to older, like what kinds of work were you doing with them when you first started?
So my first ever client was the father of one of my good friends, and he's in his 60s. And so it was just, she got it as like a birthday present for him. And it was just kind of detailing his story, his life story. So, and he had so many interesting things to tell me about. He's originally from Cuba and then studying in Russia and immigrating to Canada and the States and losing his mother quite young from a very traumatic experience. I helped him put all those memories together into a book for my friend and the rest of the family. And that was kind of me testing out, how do I even do this? What do I ask? How do I write this? And yeah, that was my first ever project.
Wow. And it's great too, because it's like when you're first starting out, it's like people that you know, they already like know, like, and trust you. You undercharge, which we all do when we first start out, you know, so the stakes are low. And so like you can kind of learn on the job. And that sounds like such a beautiful, deep project. Like, how was it for you personally to like go through that process for this client/friend?
Yeah, it was really, I really loved it. I think it was confirmation that I had made the right choice in leaving my prior career because, I mean, listening to people's stories, I mean, they don't tell me about the boring years, the boring weeks of their life. They tell me all the interesting things. And I think I didn't expect, which I should have, I didn't expect how therapeutic it might be for some people, because it's really, especially men of a certain age, which I've talked to a few now, don't necessarily talk about these things with everyone. And then talking about their lives, I guess, to a kind of a stranger was helpful for them, interesting for me. And then they always give me advice, not like deliberately, but just from me hearing their stories, I learn a lot. And I feel really lucky to be able to hear things that maybe they haven't talked about for years or decades.
Yeah, that sounds super rewarding. And like, I bet you could make a whole book on like the advice that they're giving you or the lessons that they've learned and are sharing with you. That sounds like such a profound, like beautiful process that you're bringing them through and like totally therapeutic, right? I think too, like as humans, like we just kind of dwell on like, what is the next problem? You know what I mean? Or like, what is wrong in my life? And taking the time out to like remember the monumental things in your life that, you know, like you've overcome or like you've accomplished or like the beautiful, amazing memories that you have with friends and family, like is such a boost, you know, like there's so much amazing like fuel and energy in that. So like, it's really deep what you're, you know, like the service, you know, it's like so much deeper than just ghostwriting, right? Like you're kind of helping people process, you know, and appreciate their lives, right?
That's true. And I think it's what you touched on is something that gets overlooked in ghostwriting because it's quite a personal relationship. If someone's writing your book or co-writing, I mean, especially a memoir, sharing deep parts of your life personally for weeks or months or years at a time. It's very deep and personal. You can't just tell someone, hey, write a book about my life and then not talk to them. That wouldn't work.
Yeah, just give me the bullet points and I'll figure it out.
I'll make something
I'll chat GPT it. Yeah. Why ghostwriting? Why not write your own stories or like creative fiction?
Well, you know, I've written some fictional stories. What I'm always drawn to is memoir. So I have written my own memoir, the unpublished thesis from my graduate studies. And then I have a second book that I'm going to release probably early next year for my own. It's kind of part memoir, part self-help. But I guess what you're asking, so the bulk of my work, I guess, is writing other people's words I think it's just, I just like hearing about other people's stories. I find it interesting, and I don't mind that I'm using my talent to help them. And I guess it's a comfort thing too, because I get to try on different personalities, different personas. I don't necessarily have to reveal myself, which is what memoir is, of course, which is funny, I suppose, but it's easier, right? That's probably the main reason.
Awesome. Yeah. It's interesting. I think like, when people think about like writers and whatnot, like I think that ghostwriting kind of goes under the radar a bit. So I'm always like, curious like why people choose that. But that makes a lot of sense. I'm a huge fan of biographies and memoirs. Like I've probably read hundreds at this point, and I really love and appreciate it. And speaking of, what are some of your favorite memoirs that you've read or biographies?
Oh, yeah. So Crazy for the Storm by Norman Allestad is one of my all-time favorites, and I studied it extensively in my graduate studies. I don't know if you've read that one, but it's basically, this man, when he was a boy, was in a plane with his father, and then the plane crashed, like a small plane, and his father died. He's the only survivor, and so he writes this memoir interspersing that traumatic event with just kind of growing up with his father. So I guess it's a portrait of him and his father, and it's really, really well done. Great example of a braided narrative. So that one definitely. Of course, I've read Wild by Cheryl Strayed. I recently read Prince Harry's Spare, which was written by a ghostwriter as well. Trying to think of other ones, but I'm drawing a blank, but I've read like so many as well. Memoirs are great.
Yeah.
I love comedic memoirs too, like Mindy Kaling. Yeah, that's it.
Tina Fey's Bossy Pants.
Tina Fey's. Yeah.
Hilarious. Like so
Absolutely.
Good. So deep. And like, I love, like, I so appreciate like good writing that makes me literally laugh out loud. It's like, like Bossy Pants, David Sedaris, are like some writers, like Amy Poehler's memoir was really good too.
Mm-hmm.
It was really sweet. I read a lot of memoirs and biographies of musicians, and the Mariah Carey one was incredible. And she had a ghostwriter. You have to listen to it, because she narrates it, and it just, I love that. And also like, she's hilarious. She's so funny. And there's this one part in the book, she talks about Aretha Franklin. She does a spot on impression of Aretha Franklin. That's so funny. But that book was really good. And that really like kind of stands out to me. And knowing like that she had a ghostwriter too.
Yeah. I haven't read any musician memoirs, so that's a good recommendation for my list.
If you ever need it, I'm looking at my library right now. Like I have so many, but yeah, the Mariah Carey one really, really stands out.
Okay.
So, I want to talk to you about like if people are listening and they're thinking about writing their own memoir or their family story, or there's a female entrepreneur out there. I want to do this. I don't think I'm quite ready, but like you and I are very familiar with like Rachel Rodgers. She wrote We Should All Be Millionaires. I love that book. That book really changed my life. And, like you said, like you've written a memoir / self-help book. Like I really want to do something similar of like take my stories and experiences and stuff and like help other people, a la in a similar vein to We Should All Be Millionaires, because I love that freaking book so much. So you mentioned on your website, there's a blog post about kind of like waiting to write your memoir and stuff. Like when do you know it's like the right time to maybe start thinking about writing a memoir, writing a biography?
The best time to write it is when you've had enough time to reflect upon the events that you want to write about. So a biography is usually not written about someone until they're quite a bit older, but a memoir can be about a slice of life, like Cheryl Strayed's Wild, because that was about a time in her 20s. So I would say the best memoirs, and you can probably speak to this from what you've read, have kind of the dual voice of in the present moment and then in the future when they've had time to learn from whatever it is, whatever trauma they faced. But that said, though, I would say if someone wants to write, because literally no one's first draft is what's going to be published, whether you're self-publishing or not. So just join a writing group and start if that's what you want to do. And if you haven't had enough time to reflect, that'll be reflected in the words.
Yeah. How long is the process? Like when you're working with someone on a memoir, how long is the process?
For a full length, 200, 250 pages is about 6 to 12 months of working with someone. It can be shorter if the book is shorter, or if there's a time frame, like someone's 90 years old and we're not sure how much time we're going to have. It can be shorter, but that's the usual length.
Cool. I have so many questions for you, but trying to get to the good ones. I have very specific questions. Well, I'll just ask you a whole bunch of questions. First of all, you were talking about what makes a good memoir and stuff. And there's something that I find really interesting is the kind of sense memory and painting a picture of a story that may have happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, and in a book, obviously I'm assuming these are stretches, right? You know what I mean? Because I can't even remember yesterday, right? Much less what happened last week. I was actually reflecting on Monday, I was doing a weekly planning, some session, and I had to look at my calendar, and be what the hell happened last week? So I guess what is your process for that of obviously listening to a story, but kind of filling in the gaps of setting the scene of a story that may have happened decades ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like you said, I mean, sometimes we don't even remember what we did last week, let alone 20, 30, 50 years ago for people. So I try to ask, if I'm writing for someone else, I try to ask them as many questions as I can, starting fairly broad, and then to be more specific, what did it smell like? What do you remember what this looked like, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, we don't always remember. So I do my best there, and then try to also research. I had been talking to a couple who lived in Libya in the 1970s. So I did some research about where they were living during that time and found some photographs and that kind of thing to help fill in the detail. But obviously, like you said, there's a bit of, it's true, but it's also you're painting a picture of what it probably was. So I try to keep it as close as possible. And there's so much debate amongst memoir writers about how much you can stretch, basically. But I try to keep it as close to what should have been true.
This episode is brought to you by the Creator Jump Off community. You're a creative who's running a side hustle and you feel super overwhelmed and confused by everything you have to do. I have something real awesome for you. It's called the Creator Jump Off community, and it's built to help you feel organized, focused, and empowered so you can hit your business goals this year. This is not a get-rich-quick thing. It's legit business training, community, and coaching, all taken from my experience as a creative entrepreneur for over 15 years. Life is too short to make art that you hate. Come check out the Creator Jump Off community and see how you can kickstart a profitable side hustle starting today. Go to nataliemertz.com/creatorjumpoff to learn more.
And for each of your kind of audiences, right? If it's family, you're kind of gathering family stories and stuff and family history, or if you're working with female entrepreneurs, why is it important that you write these books? Why should people care about this or do it?
I mean, I think that everyone should try to leave the world a better place than how they found it. And the people that I work with tend to feel the same. And I mean, not everyone's going to read their book or my book, especially not the family books. It's usually just for the family. But I think that we can all learn from each other's stories. And without writing it down, it's really it's lost, which I think is a tragedy. I think that we should get as many stories out there as possible.
I agree. I love stories. I don't know if you can relate, but the reason why I read so many memoirs and biographies of people that I admire, especially artists and musicians, is because they did something with their art that is extraordinary and that moves me so much. And what I love about it is reading that they were imperfect people, right? They were very, some of them very deeply flawed and had lots of trauma, or, they were not. The only exception that I love to joke about is Prince. Prince is 100% a total fucking alien. You know what I mean? Just his is just where the hell did you come from? But everyone else, they're just mortal beings like me. And if they can overcome, whatever, like their own traumas or challenges or whatever, like maybe I too can overcome things and create something extraordinary in the world. Right. And that's like why I love, other people's stories. That's why I love nonfiction. Like fiction is fun, but I think nonfiction is so fascinating because it's real. It actually happened, right? And that we can kind of create these extraordinary lives and stories. We can actually do that.
Yeah, it's inspiring. And you brought up a good point about being able to relate to, the struggles that people faced. Because I bet like none of us, you don't read a book where everything is going well. Like that would be boring, actually. And not relatable because nobody lives a life like that. Even, Mariah Carey or someone who's achieved great success. So we want to hear about how they failed so that we can learn from how they picked themselves up.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I want to talk a little bit more about like the process, right? Okay. So I'm a female entrepreneur. I'm thinking about writing a memoir and whatnot. When people contact you, are they usually like, have they not even started yet? Or maybe they have kind of a start, or they have like a first draft and then they bring you in? Like, at what part of the process do you typically come in?
Usually I come in when they've been thinking about writing a book for years, and they just, for whatever reason, have now started to take the process a little more seriously. They sometimes have an outline or a few paragraphs. They don't usually have a full draft. At least I haven't worked with anyone yet that's had a full draft, but that's kind of where I come in and I help them develop the outline, like the different beats of the story that they want to go over, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when they meet me. But I know that other ghostwriters do work with people who have full drafts.
Okay. And talk to me about publishing. Do a lot of your clients self-publish? Like, do they ever find a publisher? Are you involved in that process at all?
Yeah, so I can help people with self-publishing. That's pretty easy to do. I can also help, and I have helped people prepare book proposals to submit to a more traditional publisher. I don't have, like a connection like, hey, here's a guaranteed publication. But some people are pursuing traditional publishers, and I'm excited to see if they achieve that. So yeah, I'm happy to A, either help them self-publish, or B, help them with a plan to try to get them traditionally published.
What are some of the pros and cons of each side of like self-pub? Like I created some Oracle docs and I published them myself. I was like, I just want to like put this out in the world. I'll deal with the marketing and selling it and whatnot. But yeah, can you talk about like from what you've seen, like from your clients and stuff, what are some of like the pros and cons of like getting a publisher versus not?
Yeah. So I guess start with self-publishing. Pro is you're in complete control. So you've in control of your manuscript, of your cover art, when you publish it, basically how much money you're going to get from it, like the price, like you can choose to sell it for $2 or $10 or $20, whatever you want. And I think a lot of people like that self-control. And usually actually people who self-publish, I would say with the caveat, if they know how to market themselves, can make more money with self-publishing. That said, traditional publishing is kind of this, I think anyone that's ever wanted to write a book, it's that dream of, it's someone outside looking in and saying, hey, you're worthy, which everyone wants, right? Because self-publishing, you don't get that. And especially some of these big publishers, Simon and Schuster, Penguin, et cetera, it's nice to have that validation. Plus, they do all the marketing. They'll give you usually in advance. It's not necessarily a lot of money, but they take a lot of that burden off you. Although more and more now people are having to market their own books. So you could argue that it's not as good as it used to be 30 years ago. But that is kind of why I would say people tend to look for traditional publishing, just the clout and the resources, I guess, because the editor, cover art, all that stuff is provided by the publisher. Whereas if you're self-publishing, you need to do that out of pocket in order to produce a quality book.
Yeah. I don't know much at all about the publishing world and whatnot, but I know some authors, some who have self-published and some who have publishers. And overall, I hear like, I think unless you are already like have a big audience and whatnot, or like you already have kind of struck success with books, that the publishers aren't actually like, they're not prioritizing. They have no incentive to prioritize marketing for like, lesser known authors. And so you know, like I've talked to some authors and just like feeling really disappointed with how little marketing support, promotion support that they got. So yeah, like you said, like from what I've heard too, is like, even if you do have a publisher, like you're still going to have to work on marketing and stuff and getting it out there and getting it in front of lots of people, even with a publisher. True. Yeah.
You're kind of responsible for your own book tour and talking on podcasts and all the marketing things, unless you're like a top name. That's one of the few authors that's really reaching millions and millions of people. So,
right. Yeah. So I think like, it's not like a golden ticket. Like, okay, I got a publisher, like everything's groovy now. Like, it sounds like there's still going to be a lot of like legwork in terms of getting your book out there and getting sales and whatnot.
There is. It's not a golden ticket. And I forget the statistic, but I'll have to look it up. Of course, I don't have it in front of me, but it's a large percentage of authors don't make back the advance that they're given for from a traditional publisher. So usually there's an advance, and then if the book sales meet that advance, then after that, the author starts getting royalties, and a large percentage don't even make that.
In your experience, like with your clients, do you have any advice of like, you know, like what are some good practices to do? Like, okay, you hired Victoria and you guys have worked together on your memoir, you know, and you're getting ready to publish it. Yeah, is there any like general kind of like tips or advice that you would have in terms of like the chapter 2, I guess, like phase 2, where you're marketing and selling your book?
Tips for marketing and selling. I think talk about it until like you're sick of yourself, really, which I guess is marketing for everything. And go to where you think like your audience is for people that would be interested in your book. So if you've written a book about overcoming depression, for example, then you would want to talk to people in mental health and therapists. I mean, even like if you're an entrepreneur, just various entrepreneur podcasts and write guest posts. I would say come up with a plan of how many people to reach out to and how often.
Yeah.
And don't just, email one person.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like having a kind of a game plan, I think knowing your audience. I recorded a podcast last night with my friend Lee, who wrote a children's book. It's a Christmas story, but at first she thought it was kind of like just a general, like kind of, children's story around Christmas and like a Christmas tree. And she read it to someone and they were like, this book is actually about like grief and sadness and stuff. And I don't know all the details of the book. She hasn't like shared it with me yet, but like knowing kind of like the main idea of the book was really kind of helped her, reach out to maybe like grief groups, right? Or like, maybe different like centers or something for mental health or something or whatever. But like knowing, kind of honing in on like a main message of your book. And then like, okay, like what is the audience for that? Right. So maybe it's like families of people who have experienced loss, or going through grief or something. They've lost someone in their family or whatever. So like knowing your audience, right. Or like know who like really is going to relate to that. Right. If it's female entrepreneurs or getting even more niche than that, and then like, yeah, what Facebook groups are there? Like maybe small bookstores or whatever, maybe they're having kind of like a theme month or something like that. And just getting creative, right? And like not just just doing one thing, but like really kind of brainstorming, once knowing, having an idea of like who your audience is, getting creative on like, okay, well, where do these people hang out?
Absolutely. And one thing I would add, because sometimes it's hard at the beginning for a lot of authors to know all the different audiences, but usually they'll have shared that book with an editor, ghostwriter, family, friends, like lots of beta readers. So I would pay attention to the things that people keep bringing up about the book, and that should give you an idea of different audiences for it.
I love that. I think like talking about your book, getting it out there and stuff. And like all of that feedback is like data, right? About what people are interested in and fascinated in and stuff. And right, like you can use that to kind of help you write emails and stuff, or like your messaging around your book is like, what are people asking you about, or like, what are they really drawn to? Like, those are all the clues that you need there.
Exactly. Yeah, that should give you an idea, especially when you have no idea, or at least not enough ideas. That's what do people keep mentioning? Okay, I'll target that.
Yeah. Do you, when you work with a client, do you have, speaking of kind of like getting clear on what your message is and whatnot, do you have kind of like a framework or like a process to help them kind of get kind of maybe there isn't really like a thesis idea or statement in a memoir biography, right? Because it's really just telling the whole entire life story. But is there any kind of like, did you kind of develop like your own process or framework around how you work with clients and build a book together?
Yeah, I mean, there is a process. It's asking, first of all, a lot of questions about why they want to write the book. What is the message they want to impart? What stories do they want to tell? And they're usually, well, not usually, there always is some kind of thesis of the overarching theme of what they want to convey. I mean, maybe they don't know, but after I've asked them questions about it, there is always something. And that's how we, I should say, organize the book. So if it's here's another one I was working on recently, was how to kind of create your own copywriting business. I wasn't a ghostwriter, but I was kind of an editor helping them come up with the overarching theme. And it's just taking a look at what they've already done and what they're thinking, and then just organizing it according to the principles that maybe they didn't even know were already in their head. And then we create the outline, and then we go chapter by chapter. It's less messy than I would have imagined when I got started, because people generally have in their heads the general overarching theme that they want. And then maybe there's some editing or adding on stories as they go, but we're not creating an entirely different book from scratch when we're done, I guess I should say.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Talk to me a little bit about your business now. Like, how do people work with you?
Yeah. So my business now, people work with me usually just all online, actually. I have very few in-person clients. So we do usually either weekly or bi-weekly interviews for their book, where I'm asking them questions, or they're talking to me about specific parts of their life that they want to include. And then I will provide chapters, usually bi-weekly or monthly, depending on kind of our schedule. I've also done it the other way, where we get all the interviews done up front for a very intense month or 2 months. And then I write the book, and then there's usually a few more interviews along the way for editing and adding on things we forgot to mention the first time around. And that's it's a lot of interviews, a lot of writing, a lot of back and forth for months at a time.
Right on. Tell me a little bit about your process as a writer. What do your days look like? Are you doing this full time, or do you also do something else?
Yeah, I'm doing this full time. Or I should say, I guess about 30 hours a week is my full time. Nice. That's what I like. And the rest of the time is with my family. And my days, I mean, usually I work from early in the morning to early in the afternoon. They're broken up with either complete writing or some interviews, and then some marketing, as you know, for business. And it's a lot of, I guess, working in my basement with people. Although I don't feel lonely, because we're talking, all the time. But those are kind of my days. My day-to-day schedule is pretty similar, Monday to Friday.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how do you have any kind of like ritual or process to like help you get into like writing mode? What do you do like days where like you're just not feeling it, not feeling creative, like the writing muses have left the building? Like, how do you kind of like work through some obstacles or challenges like in your day to day?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot more trouble with that for my own writing, ironically enough. Other people's writing is easier, I guess, because they give me all of that data to work with, to make beautiful, to make sing on the page. For my own writing, when I need to get motivated, usually what I do is I actually just open up only a Google Doc. I close everything. I might listen to a nice song for like 2 minutes, and I I have to throw away my phone and just not have anything else. And then if I have no ideas, then the writing is just, this sucks. This sucks. I suck. And then it gets into something better. So it's basically just starting writing on the page. And that's how I push through it. And sometimes it produces really good pages. Sometimes it produces really bad pages, but at least I've done something, and that pushes through the fear of, what do I do, by just doing anything.
Yeah, I love that. I think like just doing bringing the body and the mind will follow is like super helpful. And this is something also I talked to Lee, who's an author, the advice that she got from like a writing mentor was like, just write the worst version of it right now. Just write the phase 1, the garbage first draft. And I can really, like when I was writing the guidebook for my Oracle cards, sometimes I was super inspired, right? And I couldn't write fast enough. And then there were times where I don't know, and I just write the most basic, awful stuff, but it's just like getting in that. And I think too, getting out of our head and just like getting into the work, right? Like, cause my brain is going a mile a minute or whatever, and this is shit. And this is going to be awful, whatever, and then like, once I just get into it, right. And get into the rhythm of it, it like eventually gets easier. And then I can go back and refine. And then usually too, like if I'm really struggling with something, like taking a break, you know what I mean? Like stepping away for a day or two and then coming back to it. It's like, ooh, okay, now I know what I want to say and stuff. So I love that of just like getting in there, even when you're not feeling it.
Exactly. It is hard because there's usually a mismatch between like what's in our brains where it's perfect and then what's on the page where we can tell that it's not really there yet. And that's hard to push through. But like you said, if you just write the worst version of the draft, like your friend's writing coach said, that's perfect. It allows you to get something on the page. And you don't have to share that with anyone. That can just be for you. And then you show them the next draft, which is a bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I'm trying to think if I have any other questions. Is there anything that you want to share? Is there any like cool client stories that kind of resonate for you? I know like at the beginning of the podcast, you were talking about that gentleman who he left Cuba.
That's correct. Yeah.
Quite a harrowing story there.
I never quite know what to say because I don't want to, reveal all of people's personal stories online unless they've given me explicit permission. But I think just what I would share, what I think everyone should do is, and this goes back to the original part of my business, is talk to your family, talk to your people that are left alive. So your grandparents, parents, or uncles, aunts, everyone. And I know it's hard to do. I struggle with it too, because it's easier to just say, hey, like how's the weather, or what are you doing this weekend, or how are the kids? And I do that all the time, but we've only got so much time with people. So, slip in another question once in a while. Like, what did you do, back when you were university, Dad? Or, hey, like, Grandpa, what was it like when you were living in this country? Or what was it like working on the farm? I think people are more willing to share than we expect, and they like to talk about themselves. So that's the advice I would give everyone. Talk to your family.
And we have phones, like you can just hit record, like you could record audio or video and just like let Grandpa go.
Exactly.
The storage on my phone is full. And so I was going through stuff this weekend, and there was like folders of videos and stuff that I totally forgot about. And in it was like, like family members that had passed and stuff. And it was like such a treasure to find like these little videos and stuff and just see them again. It's so powerful. So I love that idea of like, just hit record on Grandpa or Grandma, like, or your parents or whoever, just like capturing that, because like we're not all going to be around forever. And it's just like those like little stories and moments and stuff that eventually you really miss,
Exactly. And I am a writer, but there is something special about hearing people's voices or seeing them on video, especially when they're no longer here. So yeah, I would encourage everyone also, like you said, to just hit record, store some of that before it's gone.
I love that. Well, Victoria, thank you so much for coming on and letting me interrogate you about your process and how you do what you do. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm sure other people will too. And can you share with us like where people can find you if they want to work with you or follow you?
For sure. So my website is thisisquestionsunasked.com. You can email me at hi@thisisquestionsunasked.com. And I'm also on Instagram, sometimes more active than others, but I'm always in the DMs for Questions Unasked. I'm always happy to talk to people about memoirs, about book writing, about anything reading and writing, really. So that's where you can find me. And Thank you for interviewing me. I feel like I'm always interviewing other people, so it's kind of weird to be on the other end.
Yeah, it's your turn now.
For sure.
Well, thank you, Victoria, so much. I really appreciate this. And yes, I will. I'm looking forward to seeing maybe your memoir come out at some point. Do you think you'll publish it?
Yeah, the second book I'm definitely going to be publishing next year. And it's a bit of a humorous, why don't we pick up the damn phone and call our parents book? So that should be fun.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Hey there. Thank you so much for joining our podcast today. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would consider liking, subscribing, and even leaving us a comment. This way, it will help us to keep the podcast alive and continue to bring you some really awesome interviews and nuggets of creative wisdom. So thank you again for checking us out. I'll see you next time.